When we talk about oligometastasis, especially from breast cancer, there is really some interesting thing is happening in the world, and that need to be shared. And maybe we in Indians and Bangladesh people, the Indian subcontinent, actually can adopt few things from there. So I have divided my talk in two parts. One is our experience. I do radiosurgery only, and so we have treated almost 1,000 patients in the last 3 years with radiosurgery with all patients in some kind of protocol setting. And so we have the outcome data as well, and we have the toxicity data also. We will discuss about the breast cancer with oligometastasis, what is the outcome in our institute. And oligometastasis is a very vast area. So I have picked up spine metastasis as because the spine is a very common area and we usually don't talk about it. And there is enough evidences to tell that radiosurgery is indicated in especially spine metastasis with very small segments involved. So I'm going to talk on that part as well. Now, when we talk about breast cancer and radiotherapy, there are a few things that are very interesting before we go for something very precise like oligometastatic disease and treated with radiation therapy. Now, this is our numbers of breast cancers in 2018, 19, 20. And this, see, if you see the MRMs and the breast and BCS, see, 50% of the patients are BCS in our institute. So it is same like any Western countries where 50-60% of the patients are BCS and 50-60% patients are MRM who are more advanced disease. Many of our centers in India and probably in Bangladesh as well, 80% are MRM and 20% are BCS, which is not in our. So Kerala, though is in India, but our patient population and the treatment approach is like Western patients population. So that is something unique in our practice. So among those patients of age 62 patients in last 3 years, surgery was done. 530 were BCS, means 60%. That is extremely encouraging. And 83% of the patient got adjuvant radiation. Many of the places where radiotherapy is given for breast, it is only 20 to 25%. 80% of the patients after MRN, they don't get radiation therapy. And that is one of the reasons why the outcome is a little different from centers where appropriate treatment is done. Now, this is the mean age of presentation, it's 55 years, whereas in India, the mean age of presentation in breast cancer is 45. And if you see the sentinel lymph node biopsies on 98% of the patients, more than 10 node harvesting is 83% patients, 91% of the patients get chemotherapy, 95% adjuvant radiation, and FISH test when there is +2 in IHC. FISH test is done in 94% of the patients, and 84 of the patients who are eligible get trastuzumab. So that is excellent. When we compare with 2014 data, where our concordance, whether we are our adjuvant treatment, our radical intent treatment is up to the mark or not, we can see there is a huge leap in 2020 compared to 2014-15. So 95% of the patients actually adhere to the protocol. And when you are adhering to the protocol in adjuvant treatment and radical intent treatment, in those cases, when there is oligometastatic disease, treatment becomes very critical because we have done the hard work to treat appropriately when upfront. When it comes back, we should also take care of it appropriately. Now, when we see those 5% of the patients who have deviations from the protocol, that is mostly because of financial reasons, not because of the technical issues, not because of lack of opportunity or lack of facility. It is not like that. So that actually shows that in Kochi or our institute is well equipped to treat appropriately as per standard guidelines. And only the 4 or 5% patients who are non-adherent to the protocol, that is because only financial reason that can be sorted easily, not because of the inavailability of our structures. Now, when we come to radiosurgery, which is now very important, because as we have done a radical intent treatment and primary treatment appropriately, so when it comes back, which is critical. So we have now we have 840 patients database now, where it is updated 3-4 months back, where if you see intracranial is 44%, extracranial is 56%, and 28% of the patients are oligometastatic disease, which actually almost mimics many of the Western centers who are doing radiosurgery. 30% of their patients are oligometastatic disease, 30% are brain metastasis, and major other things are AVMs, intracranial lesions, benign lesions, and some are liver disease. So but 16% of the patients are brain metastasis. So that is little low compared to the Western population, which is around 30%. So still, there is a lot of awareness is required to treat oligo or brain metastasis with radiosurgery in Indian setting. And I think in Bangladesh and Indian subcontinent, it is true. We have a protocol for oligometastasis treatment, and all patients are done in a protocol setting. You have ethical committee approved protocol, and we have 205 patients of oligometastatic accrued, but 111 are brain metastasis, which is less than 5 lesions, which is our cutoff for taking for radiosurgery. 94 patients are extracranial oligometastatic disease, which is less than 3 sites involved with good performance and small volume disease. And as we know, we treat with radiosurgery with CyberKnife with multi-plan Volo planning system. Now, oligometastasis less than 3 lesions in less than 3 or 5 lesions, less than 3 sites, good performance status, PS 0 or 1, and low volume primary disease, controlled primary, and which is responsive to systemic therapy. These are indications for accrual for our patients, and all patients are done in a protocol setting and followed up. So our primary endpoint is to see the survival function after radiosurgery, and secondary endpoint is to see the recurrence rate, new lesion-free survival, re-SRS rate, and complications. Now, interesting is when you're doing radiosurgery for any patient, especially brain and oligometastatic extracranial site, when there is a new lesion coming in other place, are we able to treat it with radiosurgery again? That is a very important criteria. If you are not able to treat again with radiosurgery, then upon radiosurgery, especially for brain metastasis, becomes a little redundant. So we have to ensure that when we are treating brain metastasis, especially with radiosurgery, when it comes back, a new lesion coming in 6, 7, or in 1 year time, you should be able to treat again with radiosurgery. So that is also one of our endpoint to see that what is the compliance rate with radiosurgery in our patients. This is in 206 patients, in 111 patients in 2006 lesions, and you see, if you see the primary site, mostly it is lung, breast, and other sites including colon, kidney, esophagus, head and neck. These are small and very rare incidences where we got see the brain metastasis patients. Especially, we see mostly the lung and the breast. Now we have done evaluations of and mean overall survival of our oligometastatic brain patients are 13.5 months, which is at par with any published literature from the West. And infield recurrence is 16% only, and outfield patient is 84%, means that there is a new lesion coming in other places, which is more common. Then recurrence inside the field or high dose region. 12% of the patients have radionecrosis, which is radiologically documented, but majority of the patients don't need any kind of interventions. And among those, 8 out of 36 patients who are breast primary had radionecrosis. So about the patients who have recurred, about the 38 breast cancer with oligometastatic brain oligometastatic disease, 61% of the patients, means 21 out of these 34 who had recurred, actually had radiosurgery. 29% patient on 30% patient got whole brain radiation, and 4 patients required surgery. And in the breast cancer primary, 64% of the patients had radiosurgery and 36 and whole brain radiation because they had leptomeningeal disease. So radiosurgery is happening in more than 2/3 of the patients who are have patients. Rest of the patients, we have not done radiosurgery because they have leptomeningeal disease. So whole brain radiation is done in those patients. Now, about those patients who are breast cancer primary with brain metastasis, 36 patients in our cohort of 206 patients, we have seen that median overall survival is 14.5 months, and 52% of the patients have alive more than 1 year's follow-up period. In luminal B, 11, actually luminal A we have not seen any patient with the brain metastasis in our cohort. Luminal B, 11.6 months, HER2 enrich 17.4 months, and TNBC 13.7. Maybe TNBC because the less numbers are less, so it is not not the full representative. Now we have compared these with breast cancer with brain metastasis with other cancers, lung cancers and other cancers with brain metastasis, and there is no much difference in terms of survival functions after the radiosurgery. And we have compared luminal A, luminal B, HER2 enrich, and TNBC, and there is not much difference in terms of outcome. Maybe the numbers are less, but there is a trend that luminal B may be a little better than the others. Now, another interesting thing we have done with brain metastasis from breast primary and other primaries as well to club together to see that new lesion-free survival, can we have a normogram for Indian subcontinent patients and compare with the normogram which is in the Western population. We have seen that we are able to predict or take the Western normogram in Indian patients who are of good concordance. The group 1 and group 2, which are good prognosis, there is excellent concordance, but whereas group 3, which is a poor prognosis, which are non-concordant. So patients who are poor prognosis group, they do much worse in Indian patient population than comparing to the Western patient population. Maybe they have not received the full systemic therapy, or the treatment is not complete. That may be one of the reasons, or there may be some molecular factors which we need to evaluate. So this is interesting thing, and we are working on that to have our own normogram, and we are going to publish it soon about the normogram in Indian patient population, where the age criteria, the performance status criteria, the volume criteria may be a little different from what is in the Western populations. Now, if we come to the extracranial site metastasis, which is 94 patients, majority of the patients are from lung, which has gone for the adrenals and breast. So the interesting thing is, we are a center where we are doing radiosurgery as a unit, and I'm dedicated in doing radiosurgery. Still, we are not treating adequate extracranial metastasis. So many of the patients who are not symptomatic, especially bone metastasis, they are on follow. And especially someone is having a solid lung metastasis or adrenal metastasis, they most of the time get systemic therapy and not get a focal therapy with radiosurgery. Is still in us, because the acceptance is still not there. And more data from our institute or our kind of Indian institute or Indian Subcontinent Institute is going to help us to establish the role of radiosurgery in extracranial site, which is a very lacunae still there and need to be followed. Now, among those 8 patients with breast primary with extracranial site, we have seen there's only one synchronous. So most of the patients are not metachronous primary, not a synchronous primary. And mostly this is a bone, liver metastasis, and nodal metastasis. I have worked in Apollo for many years, for almost 10 years, and we have some outcome data from there also. It is our outcome data from Apollo, where the liver metastasis we have done the treatment, and we have seen this 6.5 months of median follow-up in that cohort, which is as per the Western literature, and liver metastasis with breast primary doesn't do well. Many times we see that someone having liver metastasis, especially from breast, and if they are luminal A type, they keep on recurring in new lesions, but the patient performance status is good, liver function status is good. And in those situations, we need to treat again with radiosurgery for new lesions. We have a series of third-time re-radiation for the liver metastasis from breast cancer, and that is interesting to see that actually it is possible to treat liver metastasis with radiosurgery with breast cancer primary if appropriately planned. Now, the interesting thing is, if you are doing a re-radiation for head and neck cancer, then the head and neck is not going to forget because there is a radiation memory. But for liver, what the interesting thing is, actually there is no memory, because whenever these liver cells about hepatocytes die, it is replaced by new hepatocytes, which is not there in most of the other places of the body, and that do not have a memory. So we are able to re-radiate liver tumors much easier, provided we are appropriately planning, and re-radiation is possible for brain metastasis, for liver metastasis from, especially from breast cancer, where the extracranial other sites are controlled. Now, interestingly, so if we have an internal memory nodal metastasis after the radiation, it is already into the high dose field, and re-radiation is a challenge, especially when the heart is so near. And if you are doing a conventional 3D CRT, and if it is a only solitary site of disease, then the cardiac function may be impaired and patient may have a lot of other issues and need to be treated appropriately. So we have made a protocol to treat with a surface fiducial and track it with our radiosurgery. And we have treated 2 patients with 6 months follow-up of both the patients. And both the patients, we have done echo also for both the patients are stable. And the dose to the heart is much less compared to arc-based treatment, what is done in many centers. Now, when you come to the spine metastasis now, and talk about the details of how spine metastasis we do radiosurgery. And now we are coming out from our individual experiences to the experience from the literature. Now, this is the literature from Arjun Sehgal, which has changed the practice in spine metastasis. Now, the 24 gray in 2 fractions actually are shown to be superior to conventional 20 gray in 5 fractions. So that actually is nailed, that role of radiosurgery is there for especially limited spine metastatic disease. And if you see the spine SBRT toxicities, in different literature, 20 to 68% of the patients may have pain flare. That is very important, and we are going to talk about it. Esophagitis happens in 2%, which is less. Nausea, vomiting, 5 to 10%. That is also rare. Dermatitis, skin changes, usually don't see, or very rarely. Fatigue is common because of radiation, and that is not a lethal toxicity. And in late toxicities, vertebral compression fracture, which is really important, and we are going to talk in details about it. And radiation myelitis is 1%, but it is critical, and that need to be addressed appropriately. And esophageal structures are rare, and which you usually don't see in clinical practice that much if planned appropriately. Now, when we see the Arjun Sehgal's paper, which actually has put radiosurgery for the spine metastasis upfront and one of the standard of care, we can see that it is 229 patients randomized into one group got 20 in 5, one group got 24 in 2 fractions. And we have seen if you see the 1 month response, there is not much difference in terms of conventional fractionation and stereotactic radiotherapy. But when we see 3 months response, there's a 14% versus 35% complete response. So there's a huge amount of difference in terms of complete response when there's a relatively long-term follow-up on spine metastasis treated with radiosurgery. So to see, and same is carried at 6 months follow-up. So we need to see that, if you do a patient SBRT for the spine metastasis, if the patient is expected to live long, then the benefit we can see, and which is much more than the conventional fractionation research. So the case selection is important. If the patient expires in 6 weeks or 8 weeks time, then they will not get any kind of difference in terms of SBRT compared to conventional radiation. So expected survival is more than 6 months. Do SBRT, they have a significant benefit compared to conventional fractionation, and that should be the standard of care. Now, if you see a little more carefully about the pain score, which is not much difference in terms of conventional fractionation and EA4, but you see the vertebral compression fracture is grade 4, means it requires surgery in 1% of the patients in both the group. But when we see the compression fracture As such, radiological diagnosis managed symptomatically or conservatively. 17% of the patients in a conventional fractionation, 11% of the patients are in the SBRT arm have this. So it is an important complication and that need to be addressed appropriately. So this is the complications what we see, and with expertise, with high volume centers doing it appropriately and in a structured manner, seeing the follow-ups, best case selections, optimized control and contouring and planning, accurate immobilization. That is a really important part of spinal SBRT, and appropriate treatment delivery. That is going to ensure that the outcome is as per the standard Western guidelines. What is there? So spine metastasis, less than 3 spines involved, performance is more than 50, and limited extracranial site disease. That is the inclusion criteria. And the spine has to be stable, which we will see with SIN scoring system. That has to be addressed for all patients. Low-grade epidural disease means that spinal cord compression is less, which is seen by the Bilski scoring system. That also need to be seen. And life expectancy has to be more than 3 months, which is seen by the prime score. So when we get a patient to see a breast with bone metastasis, especially less 3 or less vertebrae involved, we have to first see the SIN score, whether the spine is stable or not. If it is not stable, we have to do a surgery for stabilization. If we need to see this, there is a spinal cord compression is there or not, that will see the Bill scoring system. If it's not there, then we will plan for reduced surgery. And if the life expectancy is more than 3 months, which is seen by the prime score, then only we are going to plan for reduced surgery. So stable spine without spinal cord canal compression, low volume disease without prior radiotherapy, and good performance status, they are the ideal candidate for spinal radio surgery with low complications rate. So more and more we improve on case selections, better will be the outcome. Now, this PRISM scoring system, that is very interesting. We can see that gender, performance status, females actually do better than men. And performance status, previous treatment, number of organs involved, time elapsed between 2 diagnosis and the metastasis, and number of spine metastasis. Among that, we can make it a group. If it is a group 1 or 2, which is best group, you do radio surgery. Then the chance that patient is expected to live more than 6 months will be high. There's a median survival is 24.1 months. So these patients are definitely going to live for more than 6 months to get the benefit of radio surgery. Now, about the spinal cord compression, spinal canal compression, there is if it is grade 0 to 1B, means there's only bone involvement, but there's no compression effect, then you do SBRT. If it is grade 1C or 2, where there is a definite spinal cord compression, then we don't need to do radio surgery. Do surgery, decompress, and then treat. And why we need to do that, we are going to explain in our coming slides. Now, about the SIN scoring system, which shows the stability of the spine, that is the location, mechanical pain, bone lesion quality, spine alignment, vertebral body, bone involved, how many vertebral bodies involved, and posterior involvement is there or only the vertebral body is involved. Depending on that, we do a score from 0 to 18. 0 to 6 is a stable spine, where SBRT should be done. Anything more than 7 need to be stabilized before you do radio surgery. So that is critical to select appropriately. So if you do that, then we can see, and this is a comparative study for the toxicities and part of response for the conventional radiations and SBRT. You can see the significant pain control is 90%, and in SBRT arm, if the case selections are appropriate, complete pain control is 46 to 92% in SBRT, whereas it is only 24% with pain with conventional fractionation. So complete pain control is never appropriately achieved with conventional fractionation radiation, and local control is on 80% in SBRT, whereas it is 46 only on a conventional fraction. So in the response and in the toxicity, SBRT actually has an edge, provided we are selecting cases appropriately. Now, there is something called pain flare. If you give SBRT, radiosurgery for a patient, there can be a surge of pain. What we see in the prostate also, the PSA flare, same thing can happen with bone metastasis as well. So all patients who are getting SBRT should get steroids beforehand. So you have to prophylactically start steroid and then do SBRT. If you do that, then from 68%, it becomes 19% chance of pain flare. So that is something interesting. Those who are starting or started SBRT spine program. Now, vertebral compression fracture is critical. In different cities, it is 11 to 39%. But if you see the dose, if you get 24 gray in single fraction, the chance is 34%. Whereas if you do less than 16 gray, it is 19%. In 1310, it is safe, only 3%. But pain control is only 24%. So that also needs to be taken into account. So patients who have a stable spine and patient have and appropriately treated, then the chance of vertebral compression fracture is less. The interesting thing is vertebral compression fracture, most of the time diagnosed radiologically. Most of the time patients may not have the symptoms. When you do a scan, we see there is a compression fracture is there. Only 5% of the vertebral compression fracture needs surgical stabilization. Now, the 3 centers, we have done an analysis of 71, 123, and 167 patients, which have seen that when they have treated with single fraction, chance of vertebral compression fracture is high, 39%, where in 24 grain single fractions. When they have fractionated it, the chance is 11%, which is much less. So now, as a policy in SBRT spine, we don't do a single fraction, we make it 24 grain 2 fractions or 24 grain 3 fractions, depending on the spinal cord dose. Now, the vertebral compression fracture is interesting. The skeletal metastasis causes osteolytic and osteoblastic activity, which reduces the bone quality. And when you give radiation, then also there is a damage to the collagen, which causes reducing bone quality. And that actually increases the vertebral compression fracture. So disease, metastasis, and the radiation together actually synergistically act to reduce the bone quality and increase the vertebral compression fracture. So the future of radiosurgery in spine is going to depend how we don't reduce the vertebral bone quality. And that is where few medications actually coming into the picture. And in future, we will see there are a lot of medicines to strengthen the bone, which is going to be added with SBRT spine to reduce the vertebral compression fractures. Now, vertebral compression fracture depends on the dose. Now, if you see the dose, there is a very interesting thing. This is actually the dose, what we can see, 24 grain 2 fractions. But it is not only the dose, it is the hotspot that is also important. So how much is the high dose region inside the target? That also predicts the compression fracture. So we need to make it more homogeneous as possible and reduce the hotspot inside the target to reduce the vertebral compression fracture. Regarding the myelopathy, there is interesting thing. In conventional fractionation, we are giving 30 grain 10 fractions. Risk of myelitis is much less. It is 0.3 to 0.5%. But we should consider that pain control is also only 24%, not 80%, 90%. So that has to be taken into account. In de novo SBRT at 12 months and re-SBRT 6 months, the chance of radiation myelitis happens. And then the risk is 1 to 5%, depending on how we are treating and how the spinal cord dose is there. So we need to do an MRI to define the thecal sac. CT myelogram is critical to find out the actual spinal cord and give a small PRV margin. We never ever contour the whole spinal canal. If you contour the whole spinal canal and give a constraint, you will never be able to give 24 gray in 2 fractions or 3 fractions also. And that is not the true spinal cord. The true spinal cord is much smaller. And you can see in the scan, this is the spinal cord, which is much less. It is confined within the CSF sac, and that is not spinal cord. So we should not give constraint there. So I'll be happy if a center does CT myelogram, we also started doing CT myelogram for all our patients with spinal cord SBRT. So then we will appropriately contour the spinal canal and spinal cord properly, and then the constraints are going to be much better. Now, if you see the incidence of myelitis in our literature, prospect literature, there is not many. Only few incidences, mostly because of underreported. Many of the myelitis are considered as recurrences of disease, and they are not reported. So myelitis may be a reality, but the report is not much. So that need to be considered. So we should not only consider the literature review about the myelitis, because myelitis depends on the dose to the spinal cord. So that need to be taken into account, and the structure and the constraints need to be restricted. So it is the thicker sac dose, and it is the spinal cord dose. So spinal cord, when we are contouring, we just need to see that how much dose we can give. And thicker sac, it is little more constrained. So if you are giving 10 gray to the thicker sac, then the probability is little more than the spinal cord. So thicker sac need to be contoured separately than the spinal cord during contours. And from different models, the dose to the spinal cord is evaluated depending on number of fractions are there, and we fractionate and make the number of fractions treatment depending on how much dose the spinal cord is getting. So re-radiation also, there are recommendations. So we should thank Arjun Saigal and his team to give appropriate data about radiosurgery for the spine and how we can work on that. There are radiation myelitis is very interesting thing. There are 3 types of radiation myelitis. One thing very important is majority of the radiation myelitis happens in type 1 and type 3 in 1 year time. But there is a vascular changes that happens little late, 29 months. So we should always have a long-term follow-up to see the appropriate or the real incidence of myelitis after radiosurgery in patients. Esophagitis is much less, so that is important. Infield recurrence is something which is also important, which is a part of complications. When you see that infield recurrence depends on so many. See, if you are treating a patient where there is a spinal cord compression and trying to give the dose, either you will give less dose or not cover it appropriately. So there will be a failure. If you are having that you call it a geographical miss. If there is a metallic component there because of stabilization, then it is very difficult to identify the target. And then see, majority of the 71 to 85% of the infield recurrences happens in the epidural space, because that part is very close to the spinal cord, and where we cannot give dose without compromising the dose to the spine. And there are international guidelines. I think you all know that how to contour the spinal cord, spinal SBRT, the vertebral bodies, and they have it happens in clockwise rotations and done. And in treatment delivery, rigid immobilization is critical, because you have to set up daily and do the treatment. Thin slice imaging has to be done. MAR sequence need to be done to ensure that metallic artifacts are not there. GTB should be contoured on CT scan. OARs contour should be on MRI scan. OARs has to be respected. PTB coverage has to be proper, 95% at least. And delivery either CT scan based or robotic real-time based, which actually mandates a better toxicity and appropriate delivery. Now about the CT myelogram, as we discussed, if you do a CT myelogram, we are actually able to contour the true spinal cord. And when we are doing that, it is easy for us to deliver 24 gray in 2 fractions or 24 gray in 3 fractions. But if you are not
running short of time, sir.
Yeah, 2 minutes more. Then it will be difficult. We have done a SBRT spine in prone and supine position, and there is not much difference in terms of that. If you are treating multiple spinal vertebral bodies, then you have to they have to plan separately and then use the plan. And some plan need to be done to see the dose to the spinal cord. And sacral spine, thecal sac need to be contoured separately, and separate construct need to be done. And now this is last. This is interesting thing. This patient presented see a breast with a bone metastasis, presented with complaint of the lower cranial, the lower or the weakness of the lower extremities. And now when we have seen, we can see there is a lesion, but in the bone. But that is not the cause for the symptoms. Symptoms is there's an intramedullary metastasis. So so sometimes we have to see the patient appropriately and see the scans well to find out that the lesions are actually symptoms are because of the bone metastasis. Thank you.